I want to talk about what everyone wants to talk about now. The sort of bombshell that was dropped on us a couple of days ago. That NOFX may in fact be calling it quits after all of these years. Now, I don't know if this is absolutely true or not, but you've got some confirmed reporting from Spin Magazine and some other outlets. Spin was the first one to confirm it, whereas most of this comes off of Instagram. So let's go to Spin and check out what they had to say about it. So according to Spin, in a reply to an Instagram comment on a post that had absolutely nothing to do with the band, NOFX singer and bassist Fat Mike announced that 2023 will be the last year for the iconic punks. A person familiar with the situation confirmed the news to Spin, which you would assume Spin has pretty good sources, so there's probably at least some truth to it. When asked why the band doesn't come to Canada more often, Fat Records boss said, "Actually, we love Canada. It's just that next year will be our last year. We'll be announcing our final shows soon. Been an amazing run." He then confirmed the locations of the band's final shows in a reply to different. Los Angeles will be the last place we play, where we started, where we will end. You can see right here, right behind me, some of the Twitter or the Instagram exchange. NOFX, according to Fat Mike and according to Spin Magazine, and I believe one other outlet also could. I'm not 1000% sure on that. Band will be coming to an end. And I got to tell you, if that is true, well, they absolutely deserve retirement or whatever that comes next. If anyone's earned it, they've earned it. I will be super bummed. And I'll explain why here in a second. So on the one hand, I absolutely get it. And there's a couple reasons why this might be the right time for them to step away. For one, they have accomplished everything. They have absolutely nothing left to prove. When you really think about it, they won at the game of punk in a way that I don't know any other band ever really has. Think about what their run is like. Mike mentioned it. It's, 30 years, 3 decades of punk rock. That in and of itself, even if they were very, very unsuccessful as a band, that alone would be something to admire. That is something big. That is huge. You cannot understate how difficult it is to sustain a career in punk music and do it for over 3 decades. Regardless of anything else. They've done that. They also have that added little bonus of maybe the biggest band within punk to actually never go fully mainstream. And by fully mainstream, I mean signed to the dreaded major label. Doesn't make a band bad, excuse me, if they sign to a major. Like, that's not really that big of a deal. Some people may react in weird ways, but not that big of a deal. With that said, it's a nice feather in their cap that they got as big as they are, as enduring as they are, completely away from major labels and completely away from the spotlight for a big part of the 90s when they would have been at their theoretical peak and the media silence they gave in that era. So when you look at it like that, they've done it all. Not only have they done it all, Mike himself is the czar of Fat Records. One of, the top 5 most important punk labels ever. Forget the stuff they've put out with NOFX, because actually that's only their 2000s and beyond catalog. No Use for a Name, Lagwagon, Propaganda, Good Riddance. I'm just thinking some off the top of my head. They put out a couple of anti-flag records, including probably their best record, The Terror State. You have Strung Out. Just thinking of that 90s era. You go into the early 2000s, as I mentioned, Anti-Flag, Rise Against. They nurtured like early Rise Against before Rise Against was this behemoth that they later became. And they've even spawned the next generation with bands like the Bomb Pops and Bad Cop, Bad Cop. The other members are all entrepreneurs as well. They own several businesses. They are very successful in the game of life. And doing that by playing punk music, by playing, I wouldn't say inaccessible punk music, but punk music that was not going to be popular on radio or an MTV, and some of that by the choice of the band. They do that to have the legacy, the career, the adoration, quite frankly, probably the money that these guys have. You can absolutely see them just stepping away after all these years. It makes sense. They have earned it. And another thing is, it just might be the right time because they're getting on in life. All the members, I believe, are in their 50s. They all have families. They all have children. I know Mike's daughter, I believe, just graduated high school this past year. So they're still involved in their real lives, very involved. And if there's ever a time to get out in your early 50s, mid 50s, it's a pretty good time to spend the rest of your life with your family, away from your career, away from what I can imagine has been a pretty demanding career. Not as demanding as a lot of other bands in their situation, because they like to brag about it, and I think it's true. Like, they don't tour these regular club tours. They play big shows. They play every couple of weeks. Their schedule doesn't seem, at this point, so demanding. Now, they paid their dues, absolutely. But at this point, not the undertaking that it could have been if things had broken just a little bit differently from the band. Their enterprising nature, being able to have stuff like Punk and Drublic, the festival, and being able to just headline that and take that on the road over the last few years, as well as some of their other projects, like that just highlights how innovative this band has truly been. Beyond that, I think you have to look at the fact that they actually did survive these years. Most of the original band is intact. There's been a few members that have switched out over the year, but it's still Mike and it's still Eric Melvin. They're still the heart and soul of that band, with two other great musicians around them that have been there for a whole lot of the run as well. So they are intact, and like, they're still all right. I wouldn't say they're at their top of their game, but they're not a band in decline either. Single album, I thought was a great record. A little bit off of what they do, a little bit in the vein of a Cokie the Clown record for sure, but I thought it was really good. And maybe you liked that record, maybe you didn't. I don't think that was necessarily a sign of decline. Are they going to be as good as they were with Pump Up the Volume, War on Airism, and of course Punk and Drublic? No. I mean, but that's an insanely high standard to reach. And the fact that they're still not there doesn't mean that they're a band that needs to call it quits. They've survived plenty of controversies. They've survived Mike's behavior being all over the place at times. They've survived getting some serious backlash a couple years ago, and they got through it. I mean, they kind of were playing Vegas again, but other than that, like, they've got through it. They've weathered all those storms. They've weathered the personal issues that they've had. They want to call it quits. It's fine. I respect it. I even admire it. But I'm going to be super bummed. I'm going to be super bummed they're actually calling it quits and this is the end. Because I think NOFX coming to an end and dying of sort of natural causes will be sad, and it'll mark time in a lot of ways. And that sounds very melodramatic. I get it, but that's not really my intention here. Not to sound melodramatic. It's just true, because so many bands from that era, and this band spans multiple eras with their longevity, but so many bands from their heart, from say like the early 90s to maybe the mid 2000s, they're still going, and they're still going fairly strong. Think about it. They worshipped Bad Religion, who's kind of the godfathers of the genre that they play with melodic skate punk. Bad Religion, still around. If it weren't for a recent family emergency, it would be on tour, I think, right at this moment. They still might release another record next year. You have Bad Religion, who came before them, still around. You have their contemporaries, Face to Face, Lagwagon, still around. I can't say this for certain, but if Tony Sly was still with us, I'd be sure No Use for a Name might still be around. They have bands in the epitaph scene that they're closely associated. Pennywise, Rancid, still around, still going strong. And of course, as I mentioned, the bands that they kind of spawned off the Rise Against, the Anti-Flag, still going strong. None of those bands have ever really called it quits because it was just time to be done. You've had bands that have had lineup changes. You've had bands have difficulties and disagreements breaking up, taking it out of like the NOFX space. You've got bands like Blink-182 that have fallen apart and reformed a couple of times, and maybe reforming to their original, or at least Dude Ranch Enema state. You have, heck, My Chemical Romance. Their big reunion got put off a couple years. It's going strong now, and I know they're not directly like a NOFX style band, a Fat Records band, but a lot of that era, a lot of the previous era is still around. No one's really called it quits, because once you call it quits, you're officially part of a past time. A lot of people probably feel like that about a band like NOFX anyway, for as long as they've been around. Like I said, I went to Punk and Drublic earlier this year. It was nice to be in the median age in a crowd at a show watching music. That doesn't happen as much anymore, but it did over there. It would just really be a bummer to signal that some of this stuff we've enjoyed might be coming to an end. Like a couple of days ago, I made a video on the Ramones, and as much as I love the Ramones, for me in my lifetime, they've always been a part of the past. They've always been part of history, something from a prior era. There's punk bands that are going in different forms to this day, but still kind of feel like a part of history. They don't make a ton of new music. They may be mostly just tour. They're cashing in on nostalgia. NOFX did that to a point, but not entirely. Like when you go see them, yeah, they're not going to play that many songs from the new record, but that's okay because they have this huge career and this huge catalog that people expect. But when I think of like Black Flag that has gone under lineup changes and breakups and long hiatuses, yeah, they're still touring, but not quite Black Flag. Have the Adolescents, that same category. The Misfits, who have their occasional reunion, which is great. I got no problem with it, but it's a reunion. It's part of nostalgia. It's something clearly from the past. And that, I think, brings us to the point we're going to be at with NOFX here coming up, because we don't know if there's any serious acrimony between the members. Can they not stand to be in the same room together? I don't know. Really can't answer that. But it doesn't mean that they have to stop being NOFX, even if NOFX isn't really going to be a touring band anymore. Can they play a show here or there? Can they have, some Fat Records party in a couple of years? And, the big hook will be original NOFX or NOFX playing together again. Yeah, absolutely. So that's a little bit of a silver lining, but again, also a bit of a bummer, because that would imply that it's over and they're a nostalgia act now. They are an approximation of what they used to be, which they aren't right now. They might be older. They might be cashing in on quite a bit of a nostalgia, but they're not an approximation of NOFX. They are current NOFX when you see them right now. They can also still release music. With the advances in technology and a lot of the songs that we've heard over the years that Mike just plain out has written, there's nothing to stop them from collaborating on music and working on projects here or there and being NOFX on some form. But if this is really like the end of NOFX, the monster such that it exists, it's a bummer. It's an end of an era. And I am going to just be completely not happy. I'll be honest with you. Like, again, they have every right to do it. And I'm just speaking purely not even from an analyst perspective, just from a fan perspective. But I'll be bummed out because I look forward to NOFX. I look forward to their antics. Now, thankfully, they're probably still going to be around, like I said. Fat Mike will still be saying weird stuff. You'll still see, Hefe and everyone. Like, it'll be fine. It just won't be the same.